Welcome back to Days of Our Aristocratic, Fabulously Wealthy, and Serfless Lives. We have a very special episode in store for you, starring Catherine II, also known as Catherine the Great, Kermit the Frog, as Grand Duke Peter, son of Russia's Empress Elizabeth, Duke Theodore Beatrice Petronian IV, and guest starring Chris Hansen. And now, we find Catherine in distress.
Ew, I have just met Carl Peter Ulrich, my cousin, also known as the Grand Duke Peter. He is so annoying, plays with his toy soldiers, and is what doctors describe as nearly alcoholic, and it is so disgusting. I'm 10 now, and I really hope I don't have to marry him in the future.
The future.
Ew, I'm 15 now, and I guess I'm marrying my cousin, Grand Duke Peter.
Do you like toy soldiers? I happen to really like toy soldiers. Let's go play toy soldiers.
Hi. Hello. Take a seat. What's your name?
My name's Peter. You like toy soldiers?
What are you doing here tonight?
I'm gonna play some toy soldiers with Catherine.
Are you aware that Catherine is actually 15 years old? Are you aware that you're cousins?
You know, my soldiers are also 15.
No, don't have this with me. Do you know who I am? I'm Chris Hansen. We have all the documents. Please feel free to leave, but do know that you'll be going to jail. You're a predator.
Okay, I guess I'm gonna go play soldiers now.
No, you're going to jail. Will Catherine ever find love? Will Grand Duke Peter ruin his own life by going to jail? Will Kermit the Frog, who's also Grand Duke Peter, ever realize that he's part of an intricate system of strings, wood, and manipulation? Find out next week on Days of Our Aristocratic, Fabulously Wealthy, and Serfless Lives. Only on True TV. Welcome to the History Out of the Box podcast. I am your friendly neighborhood host, Cam.
And I'm Jen.
And we are here to talk with you, discuss, at you. We're here to talk at you with some very important information about relevant historical figures. As far as I can tell, we are the only history podcast that connects our listeners with the ghosts of their collective past. What does that mean?
The only history podcast ever.
No one knows what
There's
it means.
not one other history podcast on the face of this earth.
No, there's
not. So we're
not.
very happy to bring you the information you so desperately seek.
You have become really desperate lately with your desires and needs for history related material. So we're here to fulfill that. Thankfully for relatively free. This isn't OnlyFans, so you don't have to pay us anything. No. So yeah, it's great. It's great. So who are we talking about today?
Well, we're taking a break from the men because we've done back-to-back dudes, right? We had St. Nicholas, for Santa Claus, and then we had Ernest Shackleton. But I was feeling like we really needed to switch it up.
Jump on the bandwagon?
Yeah, we're going to actually be diving into the life of one of the world's most famous monarchs today. If you saw the title, you already know. So spoiler alert for you. But this is the longest ruling female leader in Russian history.
Well, if you also saw the little intro that I'm doing in post, you know who we're talking about.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So this is Catherine the Great.
What a wonderful name, Catherine.
Well, that's not her actual name. That's just what she's known by. Now, I know that Catherine the Great is actually a character in a very popular Hulu original series titled The Great. There's also an HBO miniseries with Helen Mirren. I haven't seen that one, but you and I watched season 1 of The Great, and Elle Fanning stars as Catherine the Great, and opposite Nicholas Hoult as her husband Peter. And like I said, only seen the first season. I believe there's 2 out and a third coming soon.
So good.
I quite liked it. Good. You didn't enjoy it?
So good. I mean, this is, for our viewers and listeners, this is an opinion podcast. We're not historians. So I have a right to my opinion. Sometimes I'm incorrect. In this instance, I'm not a big fan. But if you want to see more of our opinions, you can find all of our information, our details, our contacts, people that we follow, videos we make at Hot Bee Podcast on Instagram.
There you go.
Yes.
Get on that.
So Catherine the Great. Hopefully she is more interesting than the show we watched.
I thought it was dark and funny, and I do highly recommend it. But her life is less funny, slightly more dark. So, are you ready?
I'm always ready.
All right.
Any point in time, if you have a history person you want to talk with, you can talk to me about it. I actually am starting my own side gig, Medium, to talk to historical people.
Perfect.
I can't tell. It's 10 a.m. in the morning, and I'm getting over the fact that I just brushed my teeth and mixed it with Earl Grey tea. It's not the greatest flavor. So
what a distinguished gentleman you are, drinking Earl
I don't
Grey.
drink coffee.
I know, you actually don't.
I used to drink it just black, and now I drink just black dirt water. It's
Tea.
the same. Bean water to dirt water.
But let's jump right into the life of Miss Catherine here. Just before, actually, real fast, there are lots of Russian and German names that we're going to talk about today, and I will do my best. But I cannot promise you that my accent or pronunciations will be perfect. So please, I ask that you give me just a smidgen of grace as I try to navigate some words that, as an American woman who speaks only English, tries and practiced beforehand, tries to remember. So please, that is my warning now. All right?
Disclaimer.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Catherine the Great, also known as Catherine II, was born Sophie Friederike Auguste von Anhalt-Zerbst-Dornbrug.
Okay, no, I need to... Sophie Friederike Auguste von Anhalf-Zerbst-Dornbrug.
Again, we did 2 attempts. Both probably were massive failures, but...
You gotta yell it. You gotta yell the German names.
I guess the thing to remember here is that Catherine the Great's first name is Sophie. Okay? She was born in 1729 in modern-day Germany, then known as Stettin, Prussia. Are you okay?
Sorry. You went down the wrong pipe. Go ahead.
Getting excited about hearing about Prussia, huh?
I just got so excited. Her name was Sophie. Okay.
All right.
Oh my God.
We are one step into this, and we already had
almost
a coughing
lost
attack.
me. You almost lost me.
Prussia. Originally Prussia, now known as modern-day Germany. She was the daughter of a minor German prince named Christian August von Anhalt-Zerbst. Wow, that was rough.
Go ahead. Just own it.
A German prince. Okay.
Yep.
And her mother was related to the Duke of Holstein. Her uncle was heir to the Swedish throne, and there's legs to this nobility here. Very minor, but yes, she was of high nobility, basically what we would call a German princess. She was raised in a strict and sheltered environment. Despite her privileged upbringing, Catherine was determined to make a name for herself, and she spent most of her youth studying literature, art, and politics. As was custom at the time, she was trained under French tutors and notably referred to herself as a tomboy in her writings. She enjoyed sword training. She wasn't just dainty in her dress all the time. Although I think German princesses didn't have much of a choice. If they were sword training, they likely were wearing dresses while they were doing
she
it.
was in a dress, the sword lashed to her back. She would rip out the sword when she wanted to fight.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But yes, she lived what you would assume was a very, typical young princess life.
Oh my God.
Are you okay?
I almost died. Like my throat.
Okay, take a deep breath. I know this is a lot so far.
So much information. Catherine the Great. She's just so great. It makes me emotional.
Young Sophie, remember, her real name is Sophie. Here's the thing. Despite being a princess, little Sophie's family had very little money. They actually depended on extended family to support them.
And Amex credit cards.
Yes, if this was today, likely. So many nobles actually did this at the time. But if you were poor and you were of nobility, your only chance was to marry off your son or daughter to, some other really rich nobility type family situation.
I love how it was just like they were like Pokemon cards.
You basically had no choice.
They just trade them away.
That was the way for like royal networking for financial gain. Your family would have a kid, and then you'd find another family with another kid of noble birth, and you'd marry them off, and there you go.
You ever see those videos where like the person like it's obviously TikTok or YouTube videos where the person like shows up and he's like, I'm starting with a single ball of lint and I'm going to trade it for a 5,000 square foot mansion.
Okay,
that's what I feel like.
Side note, there is someone in our neighborhood currently right now who is doing that. A kid who's in an entrepreneurial class in high school, which I didn't know they actually did that. They have entrepreneurial classes in high school. I didn't know.
No, not in some of the states I was taught.
The kid is trading up and is trying to get $50 within 48 hours, and he started with like a pencil.
Well, that's too low. Easy. You could easily get $50 for a pencil.
Well,
I'm just saying, like, I see like those egregious people where they literally start with like air. I'm trading like, you some air.
I'll breathe in your face.
Like someone's drowning. They show up. Here's a bag of air. But that's what I feel like the nobility was for a period of time, where they would just trade their children to level up.
Yeah, that's essentially that was their bartering chip. Was I have a kid that can give you an heir,
and then I will evolve into the next evolutionary stage of Pikachu. Yeah.
Well,
Raichu.
I have no idea. I unfortunately did not.
It's okay.
Participate in any Pokemon.
We'll avoid the modern pop culture popularity things, and we'll go back to Catherine the Great.
All right. At 10 years old, Catherine, or Sophie, met her young second cousin, little Carl. His name was Carl, but we'll know him later as Peter. Carl Peter Ulrich. Carl was the Duke of Holstein-Gottorp, a grandson of Peter the Great, and heir to the throne of Russia. He was known as Grand Duke Peter. So, like Sophie is known as Catherine, we will refer to Carl as Peter the rest of this. If that sounds confusing, I will just be referring to them as Catherine and Peter for the rest of the podcast. Okay?
Very cool.
Okay. So they would be married, and as it turns out, she detested him from the moment she met him. He was already dependent on alcohol at a very young age. He still played with toy soldiers that she noted that she thought was very childish. And he was too pale. She referenced him as just like an ugly little thing. And she didn't like him one bit. Basically, when they met, they didn't associate with each other. They just ignored each other. It reminds me of a less happy situation. Have you ever watched The Swan Princess? There is something to connect this here. This doesn't have quite the happy ending.
If I have watched The Swan Princess, I don't remember doing so.
Okay, well, in The Swan Princess, it's a cartoon that I used to watch in the 90s. The princess
is
and
it
the
one
prince
with the frog, like
the French frog,
yeah,
and the puff, okay. the like puffin.
Yes, I remember.
Yes, okay.
Yes, I do.
Yes,
the weirdly appropriated animals.
Odette and Derek.
Yep,
Prince and princess, yep. And they meet when they're kids, and their parents are trying to get them to like each other, and they hate each other. In that story, they end up falling in love. This is going to be different, but again, they met when they were kids, and they just didn't like each other.
That story involves Stockholm syndrome. This one involves less successful Stockholm syndrome. So
it wasn't very successful at all, and we'll get into that. But despite her feelings, in 1744, at the young age of 15 years old, Sophie, now Catherine, was married off to Grand Duke Peter, the son of Russia's Empress Elizabeth. Empress Elizabeth was in charge at the time, and Elizabeth was Peter the Great's daughter, making Catherine's husband, Peter the Great's grandson. I know that sounds complicated. Peter the Great had a child named Elizabeth. Elizabeth had a child named Peter. And now Catherine's married to Peter.
What's with all the Elizabeths, Peters, and Johns in royalty? You notice that?
Henrys.
Just like there's just a lot of similar names over and over and over again.
Yeah, well, they're named after certain people, and they have the second, the third, the fourth. It just
we're in a simulation, so it's just a duplication factor.
Okay.
We're going from history to science now.
Right.
No, but no, this is something I've always thought to be strange. Well, that's great that they got married at an age where today you're not allowed to operate heavy machinery.
My assumption is likely this is around the time that Catherine would have been able to bear children. So
yikes.
That was also common back then at that age of getting married that young. Now, the unification, that would strengthen the bonds between Prussia and Russia and likely weaken the influence of Austria. This was not just for financial gain. It was also to
cripple our enemies and destroy the heathens that don't believe the way we do.
Another reason for marriage in royalty.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Destroying your enemies.
After the wedding, Catherine was now known then, or well, not Catherine. Sophie was now known as Grand Duchess Catherine Alexeyevna.
Sayevna.
Empress Elizabeth seemed ready to prepare the way for Catherine to take the throne along with her husband. However, the marriage was not a happy one, and Catherine quickly became miserable with her husband, who was known for his very erratic behavior and his disinterest in ruling Russia. Like, that's pretty well documented that he was an erratic guy.
The very attractive man from the show.
Men.
Oh, men.
Many.
Am I remembering the same show?
Oh, well, you're talking about the show, but in real life,
like there was one
more
guy,
than one.
And he was very, very gregarious.
Yeah, probably. I can't remember who it was in the show, but yes. Yes, there was men who showed up to fill in that void.
I don't think we're remembering the same show. Anyway, they're all the same to me. They all blend together.
Period pieces.
Jane Austen and period pieces just all smashed into one sandwich of boredom.
Well, Peter was known for being pretty unlikable, and the marriage remained, it was not consummated for years due to his behavior.
She's like, walks into the room and she's like, "Are you ready to consummate children?" And he's like playing with his toy soldiers and drinking.
Yeah, no, he was apparently like out of control.
Bottle of wine, throwing toy soldiers at the wall.
Some of the words used to describe Peter are neurotic, nearly alcoholic.
What does that
likely
mean?
Means very alcoholic.
Nearly alcoholic.
Rebellious, impotent, perhaps. So, lots of words.
He's not alcoholic. He's getting there.
Yeah,
he's almost there.
Well on his way. But he was known for being fanatically obsessed with his mother, Empress Elizabeth's greatest foe, Frederick II of Prussia, the leader of Prussia, who's his wife came from.
What was he obsessed with?
He just thought he was the best. He just liked him a lot. And I bet that the Thanksgivings were much like 2020s, with his mom's greatest enemy being his, like, savior, you know.
Was that a joke?
Yeah. It was a poor attempt, but I tried.
You slipped it in there, and whoa, you slipped it in there. I wasn't expecting it.
Politics.
Yeah.
Not to mention Catherine's mother was actually banned from Russia by Empress Elizabeth so that the woman couldn't spy for King Frederick. Catherine was like truly alone there. She was alone in Russia. Yeah. Mom got sent home. It was just interesting time, I'm sure. Probably pretty scary. But despite this, Catherine was determined to rise to power, and she began working to integrate herself into the Russian court and gain the support of the country's nobles. She actually learned the language pretty quickly. She perfected the accent, and she would use the Russian language with the people, which is a pretty big deal. She was well known for being the exact opposite of her husband. She was intelligent. She had what was quoted as good character. Define that.
She paid her bills on time.
She
didn't pay her bills on time.
But seemingly loved Russia, especially being not Russian. She just seemed to love the place. And early on, it was easy. Court regarded her very carefully, though. And in the TV show, they play this off pretty well.
Are they a bunch of dudes?
Suspicious of her. No, it's women, too.
Oh, I thought they were a bunch of dudes.
No, I don't remember exactly what happened.
The HBO one kind of blends a
lot
lot of things.
But she wasn't terribly beautiful in an outwardly way either. She was just very charismatic and seemed to gain a lot of favor. And she was charming, and she really loved to read. That was another thing that was pretty notable about her. She was a big reader, loved education, and was very often just learning a lot about the Russian people, their literature, their customs, everything like that. But then came the lovers. Remember, you said one, I said many. There's a lot of lovers throughout her entire life. Empress Elizabeth actually found out that both Peter and Catherine were taking lovers outside of their marriage, which I think, well, I would say at the time, but I think a lot of people still do that today.
How does that work back then? Is it the same as similar today, where like people just kind of,
well, I think
meet up and do things? Like, I know they were probably super regimented with what they did back then.
Well, royalty did it a lot, but then think about like if they had sired children with their mistress, or if they were like Catherine was pregnant with one of her lovers, that wouldn't be a legitimate heir to the throne. So how did they know, right? There was no DNA testing.
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
How did they know?
Well, that's why a lot of people speculate that probably there were lots of people who were kind of crosshatched throughout all of that. So yeah, but it was common. However, Empress Elizabeth found out, and she was infuriated. She actually basically coerced them into consummating their marriage and sleeping together, because Catherine would only be allowed to have sexual lovers by the Empress if she produced a healthy heir to the throne, and it had to be a baby boy, because heir to the throne that seemingly wasn't going to die at childhood age.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the historical. I could be wrong about this. This is my speculation, so please take this with a grain of salt. Wasn't it really important back then, though? Because the reason it was a boy, it wasn't necessarily because it was a male, but because it had to pass down the name of the royalty, which at that time culturally was passed through men. Was that what it was?
Well,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure that's what it came down to.
Well, I mean, a lot of it had to do with just being a man, probably. I mean,
Yeah, I think that was part of it, but I also think the name, like, because it's like today, like, so I am the world's most progressive individual in the world, so that's why I can have. Basically what I'm saying is I'm like a super feminist guy. I took Jen's last name, so I guess the way I look at it is when people, like, still today, they have like this weird, like, visceral reaction when I tell them that. Like, if they ask me, well, why? There's reasons for that. But I guess the reason I asked this question, because this very awkward question, is that I know that it's not as important today in America, but in some countries it is incredibly important for the name of the family, which is passed through the father and the husband, to continue on. So I think that plays, it maybe might have played into it. I could be wrong.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, I mean,
it's a genuine question. I'm not like trying to infer anything. It is a genuine question.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the exact reason is why, but it was just sort of assumed that a male heir is preferable to a female heir. But then look at like Henry VIII. His heir was Elizabeth, right? Mm-hmm. Queen Elizabeth. I mean, so it happens, and like Queen Elizabeth, for example, is a huge figure in the British monarchy.
Yeah,
and so I guess it happens, but it was always preferable to have a boy.
Well, I guess the question that I have is that I don't think the man taking the female's last name was common back then, was it?
No, I don't think they did.
So that's my point.
I don't know if it has to do with the name though, but like, I don't know.
No, it's a good question. I think those lineage questions are interesting because, like, culturally, right now it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore unless you're like the royal family, which there's a whole nother litany of hilarity there. But with that being said, like, I just think it's very interesting because I do know that there was like some serious cultural like rules that you had to play within at that time. So it's like, you know, I don't know if that's the case today in some areas. Like, I know some countries probably, but definitely not here.
Well, living in America, we have no royalty except the Kardashians, of course. So, and
our all of Congress is royalty.
Newly absorbed Harry and Meghan.
Yeah,
so that's our only royalty.
The entire
here.
house is all royalty. But anyway.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure, but basically,
this is interesting. I just thought it was.
They were told to get at it, start making babies. You can have your lovers, but we need an heir to the throne, was basically what they were told.
Could really confuse them, inviting all the lovers all at one time.
Well, she had a baby boy. His name was Paul. Oh. And Peter was it was Peter's son, apparently, maybe. So he was seen as the illegitimate heir, but it could have actually been her lover's child.
Did it look anything like him?
I don't know. I've got paintings. They all look exactly the same in
that
paintings.
Is a good point.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It literally is the same face on this painting.
It's implicated at the time. At the time, she said it was Peter's, but in later writings, it's implicated that it might have been her lover's.
Ooh,
so we
drama.
We don't know, but officially, Paul was the heir to the throne after that. So in 1759, she actually had a little girl that they named Anna, but Peter dismissed this child, accused it of being somebody else's. He was not the biological father.
How would he know?
Because it's a girl, Cam. Girls are not legitimate, right? I'm being sarcastic if you can't tell. But despite Catherine dismissing those claims, he was basically like, no, that's not my child. And Anna, unfortunately, passed away at 14 months old. So
yikes. That's sad.
Yeah. Now,
rip Anna.
Yeah, very, very sad. But there's more to come. Because on December 25th, 1761, Peter and Catherine got the Christmas present of a lifetime.
What was it?
Kidding, but
Well, you can't tell us what it is before you're kidding.
Empress Elizabeth died.
What a gift.
Yes, she left Russia to her heir, Peter, now in line to take the throne. And now it was Catherine's opportunity. It had finally arrived to take power. Her husband is now named Emperor Peter III. However, this was a very dicey time because Russia, while allied with France and Austria, was in the middle of the 7 Years' War against Prussia. And Peter said, away with this. I love Prussia. I love Frederick, leader of Prussia. So he pulled Russia out and created an alliance with Prussia
Is there
instead.
like any evidence at all that maybe he did actually love the leader of Prussia?
I don't know.
A country that
He was a
seemed
big fan.
to have taken inspiration from Russia as its name.
No idea. All I know is that Peter liked the guy, didn't like that his mom was aligned with his enemies, and once she died, he took Russia out of that war and said, we are with Prussia now. So
Interesting.
he was obsessed. He was obsessed with the guy, according to from what people were saying back then in writings.
Oh, I just read ahead. This makes sense now. He was a double agent.
Peter, too, was a native German. He hated Russia, and Russians he made no effort to connect with them. He made no effort to hide he despised Russia. And regardless of being their ruler, that didn't matter. He just didn't like Russia, and he kind of made it known. No one in Russia seemed to like him. He was very likely preparing to rid himself of his wife at this time as well. There was no love lost.
So I've got a question. So this is because I can't, all the history that I have up in my brain, it leaks out sometimes. So Prussia, which is now Germany,
Today, yes.
invaded Russia at some point in time in order for Peter and his family to have power.
I didn't go into the deep depths of Russian and Prussian history for this, so you're asking me pretty deep questions I don't have the answer to.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to look this up. Please feel free to put it in the comments if you know. I just think that that's interesting that a native German ruler who is now ruler of Russia is still ruler of Russia, even though he's native German, which explains his love for Frederick.
Probably should look into actually the history of
Dynamics.
Peter the Great, his grandfather.
Yeah.
'Cause it probably has something to do with that.
Yeah, it's fine. I'll look it up
I'm
afterwards.
so sorry if you have questions. This is about Catherine, not Peter.
Okay. Anyway, back to Catherine.
So let's talk about the coup. Dun, 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 dun. The reign of Peter III was very short-lived. As soon as he was basically in, I would say, office, not really office, as soon as he was king, czar,
in his
emperor,
house.
yeah, he was overthrown by a coup led by his wife, Catherine, and her supporters. Happy marriage indeed. How did she pull this off, you may ask? Well, most importantly, she had the favor of the people. Public opinion of her was wonderful in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Plus, her lover, Grigory Orlov, was stationed in the St. Petersburg regiment, and he spread the good word about her, too. He was one of her conspirators for this. Yeah, she was very, very popular. And on June 28th, 1762, what would actually now be July 9th, there was some issues with the calendar in the area at the time. Basically,
Were they not on the Gregorian calendar?
I don't know that. All I know is that at the time it was recorded as June 28th. Today we would recognize it as July 9th. She led troops into St. Petersburg and that rallied behind her, proclaimed herself as Empress and the autocrat in the Kazan Cathedral there. And she had the support of the Guard, the Senate, the church. They all agreed.
Loved her.
Well, yeah, they let her just take over. Yeah. So what she ended up doing, well, what happened to Peter?
No one cares.
What about Peter?
No one cares.
Her hubby. Well, it seems he didn't put up much of a fight at all, maybe, at least from what the history books say.
He was playing with his toy soldiers.
He abdicated. She likely forced him. Well, she did force him, but likely to really, really force him to actually sign the abdication contract letters. He abdicated the throne. The very next day, she had him arrested. And 8 days later, he was dead.
He died from heartbreak.
Well, no, it's likely that he was assassinated. The official autopsy said that it was a severe attack of hemorrhoidal colic and
Apoplexy.
a stroke.
So he pooped himself and had a heart attack.
Yeah, I don't know. That was the official autopsy results.
Just
He had
kidding.
only been czar for 6 months.
Hemorrhoidal. Yeah, he had
Hemorrhoidal
a
colic
hemorrhoid
and
that
stroke.
That's a sad way to go.
That's the official autopsy reports. And while some do think that Catherine played a role in this, historians say she likely didn't. It was probably her lover and other conspirators who sort of, if they killed Peter.
He got arrested and then kept saying, "I hate Russian people," and they just
were like,
they were like, "Hey, we let you live for these 7 days, but if you say it again on the 8th day, we're gonna have to forcibly give you hemorrhoids and a heart attack."
There's just a lot of mystery around his death, but it is generally agreed upon that he was assassinated by Catherine's conspirators, whether she wanted it to happen or not.
Do you think she was sad?
No.
I think she popped open a bottle of champagne.
She was like, thank God.
Champagne.
Been annoyed of that kid since I was 10 years old.
Yeah. Buried him with all of his toy soldiers around him.
Yeah.
Bottle of Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Public opinion, though, at the time was that Catherine had something to do with it. So, but yeah, Peter was dead. He was dead a week later. Now, in September 22nd of 1762, she was crowned officially as Empress at the Assumption Cathedral in Moscow, and she began her reign that would last for over 3 decades in Russia.
Wow.
And when Catherine was declared Empress of Russia and took the throne, she became one of the few women in history to rise to such a position through her own efforts. Historians actually debate whether she should be considered a regent or a usurper. And her lineage is a little unclear because of a lot of the stuff being a lower level lovers, but like a lower level princess in Germany. There's like a lot of
hierarchical history that is complicated.
Yeah. So yeah, was she a usurper of Russia? That lasted for over 30 years? Maybe. Her power revolved around, people liked that she was saying that serfs, essentially slaves, but we'll talk about the difference in a second. Serfs, which was a huge part of Russia's economy at the time, should be emancipated.
Yeah.
Remember that. It's very important that was one of her like key things that she was advocating for. But yeah, I don't know. Do you think it's time for a break?
I say we take a break. I'm going to really contemplate what hemorrhoidal colic and apoplexy stroke means.
Someone here is listening to that and they're just shaking their head at how idiotic we sound because
that's okay.
Apparently
that's
it's
fine.
Basic,
Not everyone's a
term.
doctor. Okay. I just think it's just interesting. You know, how does that death work? Do they poop themselves and then have a heart attack because they poop themselves, or they have a heart attack and poop themselves? It's just complex. We're going to take a break. And we're back from our fictional commercial break. Hopefully you heard the commercial and hopefully it was helpful to your needs and desires as a listener. So hemorrhoidal colic apoplexy stroke.
I looked it up and really fast during the commercial break, and there was not much to help me figure out what it even...
There's no... I mean, can this be solved with Pepto-Bismol? Like, how do you live through?
It's generally assumed what it looks like, that people think that autopsy result was ridiculous and that he died somehow another way.
So they basically took a dartboard and put a bunch of different names of things that people die from and threw it out there, and whatever it landed on, they just said that's how he died.
I mean, maybe. I guess it's just, yeah. I mean, for all we know, he was hung from a tree somewhere. I don't know. It's complicated.
It's kind of a silly... I mean, even if he was kind of an unfortunate, he died of.
I even looked up what that meant, and there wasn't like. Apparently, that's sort of just attributed to Catherine the Great and Peter. Like that's not a common diagnosis.
Interesting.
So I don't know. But let's get back into it. Enough about hemorrhoidal, whatever the heck.
Colic, apoplexy stroke.
Sure. During her 34-year reign, Catherine worked tirelessly to modernize and westernize Russia. She was dedicated to the country, despite not being native, and she established a new legal code. She reformed the country's financial system. She promoted education and arts, a bunch of great things. She also expanded Russia's territory through a series of very successful military campaigns, including the conquest of Crimea and the annexation of parts of Poland.
Interesting.
It's stated that her goal was to rival Versailles, the illustrious French court of glamour, poise, education, and justice. I'm sure you're familiar with Versailles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a treaty there at some point in time that was really important, and people forget what it means.
It seems that she really liked the idea of Russia becoming I guess the way we would think of like Baroquean French
Interesting.
Style, right? When her husband's predecessor, Elizabeth, died, Russia's treasury was almost completely depleted. So she inherited this because Peter did nothing to help the problem either before he abdicated, right? Her solution in 1762 was to secularize the property of the clergy, basically reducing the power that was given to it by Peter the Great originally. That would be 4 leaders previous. The clergy owned 1/3 of the land and serfs in the country, and by her actions, she essentially replenished the treasury. But we'll go more into what that actually resulted in.
It's like a really old form of like weird eminent domain, I guess.
Kind of. It was a big deal for... Well, you'll see, because it wasn't just replenishing the treasury. A lot of other
taking.
Yeah, it was.
This is ours now.
Yeah. Despite her many accomplishments, Catherine was not without her controversies. She was known for numerous amounts of affairs, had a total of 14 children.
Dear God.
Only 2 of whom were fathered by her husband, Peter.
She was carrying a child every other day.
Well, think about it. So her husband, Peter, maybe fathered Paul and Anna. Anna died when she was an infant, essentially. Paul, maybe. Then she had a bunch of other children with all of her little lovers.
Her side pieces. Yeah. Her side bays.
14 children.
That's a lot of babies.
Oh my gosh, it's like 19 kids and counting.
That's violent.
14 kids and counting.
Violence.
Ugh. Yikes. But she would use these lovers for gain all the time. And while she treated them pretty well for the most part, like she was a generous lover, not just in the bedroom, but like outside. She was very...
everywhere.
She would give them money, positions in her court, all sorts of things. So you had a lot to gain with being a lover with Catherine the Great. But for example, Stanislaw Poniatowski.
Poniatowski. Do you have a dyslexic moment there?
For some reason, when I read
Stanislaw
Russian names, I have like a very hard time sounding them out.
Interesting.
A lover.
Yes.
Of hers who would basically...
Was he the first simp?
He would be a simp.
He was the first simp.
He was a simp for Catherine.
Good old Stanislaw, the first simp.
He was instated by Catherine as King of Poland. And she inserted him into the leadership of the neighboring country, basically to resolve some lingering issues about boundaries between the two powers. So it was beneficial on all parts. He was suddenly a king, and she was able to solve a boundary issue.
That must be
Poland.
nice. That's nice.
In 1767, Catherine attempted to bring together delegates from all of the social classes and regions of Russia, except the serfs, of course, because serfs, ew.
Ew.
No.
Ew. Poor people. Ew.
Just kidding. But Catherine...
What? Obviously.
Catherine wasn't exempt from a royal's attitude, an elitist attitude towards serfs.
Yeah, she had that Salt Bay taste.
Yes. Her goal was to form a constitution for the country by gathering and hearing everyone's desires as Russian people.
Except the people. Ow.
Except the serfs.
Ow. Ow.
Now, it got nowhere after months. And a commission of the draft Catherine came up with was called Catherine's Instruction. France called it too liberal.
Huh?
It was pretty much useless in terms of the Russian people. It wasn't implicated, but it was just this interesting thing that she had in the beginning of her reign. And we'll see how things change. Remember, 34 years is a long time to change your mind. So, too liberal at first. She was also accused of being ruthless in her pursuit for power. And she was not above using assassination, imprisonment, other means to eliminate her enemies.
And this is why I always say there's no difference at all between who runs anything. Because if a dude runs it or a chick runs it, there will be murder and blood.
Yeah, pretty much.
There is no difference. Isn't it all? And you might think that there is. There's not.
In 1773, nearing the end of the Russian war with Turkey, which would result in Russian victory in mid-1774, a former officer named, here we go,
Yemelyan Bujikov.
There we go. Began inciting an uprising.
Good old Yemen. Yemen.
The movement spread rapidly, and by June 1774, he had amassed troops that were prepared to march on Moscow. And the armies returning from Turkey were sent by Catherine directly to that rebellion, and where the troops were, smoked them like a Traeger girl. Absolutely.
Nice commercial is nice. Like that was a good plug. Good.
Yes, of course.
Nice. We're not sponsored by Traeger.
Pugachev was captured, beheaded, and Catherine was realizing a very difficult and terrible lesson as a leader. You can't please everyone. So.
And this is, I think, where we should talk about this, because I think it's the same today. It's the same.
I mean,
not in the sense...
less beheading, I hope.
And less people named Yemelin. But yes, one less now. But
I mean, yeah.
I guess my point is that it just hasn't really changed much. I mean, you can't please or satisfy everything. Otherwise, you just...
Unfortunately, no matter what you think and how much you believe in whatever you say as a leader, you will always have opposition. And in the case of being royalty or a national leader, there are people who don't want you around.
Yeah.
So, pretty crazy. But this also led to some changes in Catherine's beliefs, it seems. Or at least how she believed she should proceed as a leader.
She changed her mind after getting in trouble.
The serf emancipation idea has entered the chat.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Serfs made up...
Yeah. Keep going.
Serfs made up most of Russia's economy. And during this time, land-owning nobles owned serfs that were bound to the land that they worked on. And any children born of those serfs worked on the same land. They weren't exactly like slaves, but pretty close. They had very limited rights. People would become serfs in exchange for their freedom, for protection and support during times of hardship.
Like
indentured
servitude?
Indentured
except
servitude,
without being released.
Yeah, kind of. And indentured servitude, I believe, is 7 years.
So
in
servitude.
Servitude.
Kind of like 5 to 7. I think it varied, but still, like the serf is just kind of like, well, I guess I'm now the property of Yemelin.
You could advocate for yourself to be released, but there was like
how does that
conditions
work?
for this.
What does that mean? Like you show up at a courtroom, hey guys, so look, I've been a serf with you for like 5 years now, and I'm being recruited by another serfdom down the road, and I really would like to actually work for them instead of you. I know you pay me well. I know you've got me with some solid benefits like living in mud and pig filth. With that being said, I could also live in cow filth with them. So could you release me and I'll go be a serf with them? Is that how it went?
Yeah, no. There was like ways that they could get out of serfdom, but it was difficult, and a lot of ways they didn't even have it wouldn't be beneficial for them without any assistance, right? Like they would just go out and they had nothing, so it didn't even matter. So it was just like no choice.
You may leave. But you may leave your family possessions and house as well.
Yes. Basically, they were heavily taxed. The crops and everything they grew on that land was given to the landowners that were their basically owners. Anyway, Catherine realized that these owners of the serfs would never tolerate her releasing them from ownership. So, unlike Daenerys from Game of Thrones...
Okay. All right. Got to stop plugging pop culture references, but no, just go ahead. Fine. It's fine.
Spoiler alert.
Look, unlike, the owners of a farm in Stardew Valley with Juminos, she did what?
She reorganized the slave/serf system. I've been referring to them as slaves. A serf is like one step above a slave.
Junimos or Juminos? Junimos.
I don't remember.
I can't. It's my Stardew Valley game. I'm betraying the people right now. Anyway.
She reorganized that system. And despite she previously called it deplorable and disgusting and needs to be rid of, but she decided to reorganize it. And she needed the support of these owners. She knew it. So she took away the serfs' rights to directly appeal to her if they were being mistreated. Because they had that right before, and she removed it. She said they could still file a complaint, but this was mostly an action she gave them so they wouldn't complain about something being taken away from them. Essentially, a serf could appeal their issues, but not to her.
She created the DMV, is what she did. She created a system that is so completely useless that it takes years off your life to get anything done, basically. You could put a complaint in and it might be heard by somebody, or it'll just maybe potentially probably go into the garbage.
let's just put it this way. The only thing that a noble couldn't do to a serf
Yeah.
was essentially kill them.
Right.
They could do anything else.
Essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, if you tied them to a tree and left them to their own demise, it's not you who killed them. It's the environment and exposure.
No, yeah, you could punish them.
Right.
And they could complain that they were being punished, but who could they complain to? Because they couldn't
Not
complain to the king
Catherine.
anymore. Everything else was on the table besides killing them. They were basically property. Farmers were bound to land, and that land was bound to people, meaning nobles. So Catherine the Great imposed serfdom on the free Ukrainians.
Wow. Interesting.
That's an interesting
They've
hot
got a
topic today.
very rough time of it,
Yes.
generally.
Yes, they do. They heard that right. She chose favorites to distribute land, to have more serfs, to control more serfs. She worsened the lives of many peasants in her reign. Serfdom conditions worsened under her rule than previously before, which is so interesting considering that
But-
she basically became ruler because
But
of her belief to emancipate serfs.
I thought that she would rule better.
Catherine, perhaps
I
not
thought
so great.
she would rule better than Yas Queen.
Yeah, well, according to a census taken in 1754 through 1762, Catherine herself owned 500,000 serfs, and an additional 2.8 million serfs were owned by the Russian state itself.
Hypocrite! How dare you?
Well, like we say,
Why does it always turn out the same? This is like legitimately, this is something that I've been like, I don't want to say struggling with, but I've been thinking about as 2023 enters the chat, because it's already in the chat. It's in the chat. We're in the 2023 chat. The thing I've been thinking about is it's just nothing really changes. It always seems as if people who come from nothing get into power, or their family over time gets into power, and then for some reason they start out real nice and good, and then like a clock goes off, like an alarm goes off in their brain.
well, some might
And
say
all of a
power-
sudden they become terrible.
some might say power corrupts.
I don't know if I agree with that entirely, because people say like power corrupts, absolutely. Like I get like the argument, but you have to have power somehow. And yes, there's been instances of people who do it well, but it's just like, it's always like the people that rise up that are really, really loved, and like super, super popular. They're always doing like really insidious crap behind the scenes.
Yeah,
You know,
politics.
it's just weird. It's unfortunate. It shows you how, I don't want to say naive, but how easily tricked people are.
Well, let's talk about Gregory Potemkin. Potemkin. That's what I said the first time. You just heard it wrong. This dinglehopper of a dude.
It's a dinglehopper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another lover of the Empress.
Okay.
She took many, remember.
Yes, she was quite the lady.
He's what I would call the embodiment of a sugar baby.
He looks like one.
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. But Catherine, she saw him as a very extraordinary man of whom she could sleep with and share her power with.
Oh, wow.
During her reign. And even after their trysts ended, after a 2-year-long affair,
Trysts?
their sexual escapades.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah, she treated him as an equal throughout the rest of her life, actually. He was the parrot on her shoulder. The one whispering in her ear.
Punish all the serfs?
Well, he did seem devoted to her, but he was also an extremely ambitious man, as one would be, who's sleeping with the essentially queen, Empress. I'm sure his work to play a part in her rulings had nothing to do with his ambition and only his undying love.
I mean, let's be completely honest. Catherine only had a face a mother could love.
Oh, for paintings, yikes.
I mean, I can say that now that she's a bad person. Apparently, I can say that. I mean,
Well-
she had 500. She had 500,000
Serfs.
That's 10 Allegiant stadiums. That's a lot of people.
So Gregory, he was viewed as her husband, even though he wasn't actually, not officially.
Am
But
I a
he was-
husband?
Yeah, he was seen as her husband, kind of, for people around. But let's talk about something everyone loved at the time. The French Revolution. Let them eat cake, as Marie Antoinette would say. When French royalty was having their heads lopped off by the people, Catherine, like many other royal members of Europe, was frightened.
Because she was the same.
She called being an aristocrat a profession, and she refused to bow to the whims of the people when it came to stepping down and all that.
Oh, so she's now literally a despot. That's interesting.
Poland, encouraged by the revolution in France, actually began rioting in 1792, and Catherine responded by sending in her troops, shortly thereafter annexing most of western Ukraine, all under the pretext of a growing revolution, and she ultimately wiped Poland off the map of Europe entirely by segmenting the country between Russia, Prussia, and Austria in 1795 in retaliation.
Wow, she was a real cold stone. Word I can't say because YouTube's censoring things.
Oh, yeah. She was a leader. Some
That's
say a leader
great.
has to be, but yeah.
Oh, of course, yes. A leader does have to own 500,000 people by virtue of being leader. And they have to also cut off all avenues of communication between them and the people, further annexing them from the people and further removing themselves from the populace so they become disconnected. That is exactly what a leader needs to do.
Let them eat cake.
Yeah.
In turn, a writer by the name of A.N. Radishev,
Yes.
I did that one right.
Good job.
Tried publishing a book around the same time. This book criticized Russia and Catherine's approach towards serfdom, which, funnily enough, sounded a lot like Catherine's instruction. Remember what she had published way back when, in the very beginning? Sounded a lot like that. Things change because Catherine had the man tried, condemned to death, but then she had mercy, pardoned, and exiled him.
Oh, that's great. That's so wonderful. She was going to kill him and then she just let him to go to a different... She is such a... Wow. Oh my God. You know what's funny? I would have been yeeted so hard out of like any historical situation that doesn't allow the freedom of speech. I literally, they would have used me as an example. They really would have, because I hate this stuff. I can't, like, even today I'm just like, well, you're just a public servant. You drive a Prius to work. You're just like us. Like, stop acting like you're not, like that type of thing. You know, like this is nonsense.
Radicals were closing in on Catherine.
I hope so.
She had no suitable heir to the throne because Paul, her son, remember the son that's attributed to Peter, who maybe or maybe not was Peter's, but whatever. She viewed him as incompetent and imbalanced.
Were they cousins, Peter and her?
Second cousins.
That's why he was incompetent and imbalanced, if you get my drift.
Yeah. Her grandson didn't fit the bill either because she had grandchildren. She actually loved her grandchildren for the most part.
Sure she did.
Yeah. He was too young. So what to do?
Be dramatic. Be very dramatic. Make it seem like you're the victim. That's what you do.
Well, she didn't have
It's the people against me, not me against the people.
Yeah.
I'm the one at risk here.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Catherine the Great died on November 17th, 1796, at the age of 67 years old due to a very sudden stroke.
Where's their hemorrhoidal colic involved?
Well, this is interesting, actually. She had lovers up until her death. She actually chose handsome and young men, which I wanted to point out. She had many lovers up until 67 years old, so.
Hi, little child. That could be my son. Would you like to have some tea?
Her death is
Yuck.
interesting.
I bet it is.
On the day prior, November 16th, Catherine had a normal morning of coffee and working at her desk. She actually told her maid that morning that she had the best night of sleep she's had in a long time.
She sent some emails.
Yeah, she's typing up some emails, answering some stuff. But by 9 a.m. on the 16th, she was found on the floor by a maid who claimed she was purple and not breathing. She fell into a coma and was officially pronounced dead the following night around 7 p.m. on November 17th. An autopsy confirmed the stroke, and there were rumors spread afterwards of a very ghastly sort. I know you're probably reading ahead and going, ew. I don't really want to say it out loud because I'm not going to get us in trouble on YouTube, but British and French publications, basically tabloids, started circulating a rumor that she had died after having inappropriate relations with a horse. Ew.
That is how.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Scholars believe this rumor was built off the back of really nasty, nasty rumors, especially in the British and French areas of the world, where Russians had a tendency towards that type of action with animals.
Supposedly. Proven?
It's
supposedly?
no, it was just a disgusting thing.
A very incredibly...
it was
okay.
voiced all over the place in anti-Russian literature,
Yes.
and it was also extremely based in racist connotations,
Yep.
dealing with Russian being Asian in nature.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That didn't age well.
No.
So she probably just had a heart attack, maybe hemorrhoidal colic.
She probably just
apoplexy,
just had a stroke is what
Apoplexy,
happened.
maybe.
She just had a
Interesting, by the way, that she, because I don't like her still, don't care. I really, that they can say what they want about her. Interesting, she died of the same thing that her beloved toy playing nearly alcoholic, neurotic husband died of.
Yeah, it was pretty disgusting. So at the time, that was the rumor, but she died of a stroke. And in her will, Catherine specifically stated to, quote, lay me out dressed in white with a golden crown on my head and inscribe my Christian name, Sophie.
That sounds like a metal band, like, lyric.
Like Fall Out Boy.
Dress in white with a golden crown on my head.
Yeah. She was eventually laid to rest in the Saints Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Wow, what a great place to be buried after owning 500,000 people. And
I mean,
that's
here's the
awesome.
thing. She
That's great.
is remembered as one of Russia's most effective and influential rulers still today.
What does that mean?
I don't know. You can ask the Russian people.
Yikes.
I'm just sharing the information. According to Russia, at least, that is the case. She is still celebrated in Russia for many of her contributions to the country, because I know we talked a lot about the serfdom. However, during her reign, she did expand the country west and south by more than 200,000 square miles. She reorganized 29 provinces, invested in many projects, including building new towns, renovating old ones that were in desperate need of renovation. She was not scared to spend money in reinvesting in things for Russian culture. One of the towns she actually notably founded was Odessa, which I'm sure you've heard of that city before.
Odessa, Texas, made famous by Friday Night Lights. Yes.
Right. I've seen that it's pointed out more that Catherine is judged based on her being a woman more than as a monarch, which questionable, to each their own. I still think Henry VIII is a POS too.
I mean,
regardless
they kind
of him
like,
being
look,
the separation of the church and the
state
monarch.
I it's really hard to talk about these people with like any semblance of reverence in my position, just because a lot of them, they've done good. And here's the thing: is like you could say the same about founding fathers, right? You can say the same thing, and I think the purpose of this show is to really kind of explore this. I don't agree with how Catherine did things, and I don't think she was a very decent person. But at the same time, I mean, she did things better than Mr. Hemorrhoidal colic apoplexy stroke guy.
You make a good point bringing up the founding fathers, because the Declaration of Independence talks about, freedom for all, blah, 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 blah. And then you have someone like George Washington, who owned hundreds of slaves, who did release them upon his death. However, there is the connotation there is he still had slaves. He was a slave owner.
Well, and you also release them into a world in which they have no
rights,
no
idea
grasp.
what to do. A lot of them grew up in slavery and knew nothing else. Yeah, so there's a lot of
the original Chad had his
there's a lot
pimples.
of. I think the thing we can all agree on is there's a lot of ugliness in every country's history. Unfortunately. Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with slavery and serfdom.
Well, I think a lot of it also has to do with like almost like because I think a lot of this stuff like we experience today, it does stem from Enlightenment type stuff. Like not all of it. Enlightenment's not the perfect.
Well, Catherine was big on Enlightenment principles.
Well, that's what I'm saying is it stems from that, but you also have to keep in mind that at that time those principles were in conflict with every facet of society at that point in time. And not to say that people didn't not agree. Like I'm not saying that like there weren't people that were like pushing for it, but that was like a cultural thinking version of the sexual revolution, if that makes sense. Like it was a counterculture in a lot of instances until people adopted it. And then as time went on, at least in America, they looked at it and said, wait a second, we're not really living up to this thing.
Yeah.
And there's criticisms. There are criticisms and they're worthy criticisms. But at the same time, those things happened and a lot of things changed, unlike in some places where they didn't.
Yeah. Her private life, Catherine's, was ripe with controversy, especially in a historical context. Again, she is the subject of a very lucrative TV show that is airing right now on Hulu called The Great.
Oh, I thought it was HBO. Oh.
HBO has one with Helen Mirren.
Yeah, I don't know the difference.
The Great is on Hulu, starring Elle Fanning as Catherine. I actually think she does a really good job. So if you want to check that out, check that out. But the show actually does take a lot of liberties, from my understanding. So it's a TV show.
Has to be entertaining.
Catherine the Great, by most accounts, was egotistical, and she was domineering, and she was ruthless in her leadership as a Russian empress. But she was also a woman of action. And if you take it from that perspective, some may say one of the greatest rulers in Russian history. So that is it for Catherine the Great, aka Miss Princess Sophie of Prussia.
Yeah.
And I think we did a little bit of the good, the bad, and the ugly for her, for sure.
Yeah, on a scale of 10, I didn't do this for the other people because, I mean, obviously Santa's a 10 and JFK is obviously a 10, outside of his very questionable ethics.
Wait. Who was your least favorite? Wasn't it Alexander the Great? That was one of your least favorite?
Yeah, he was kind of a poopy face.
Yeah.
Probably flagged now because I said poopy face.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's not anywhere close to my favorite. Like it's disappointing because I really liked Cleopatra. Mm-hmm. Like she was great. And then obviously Sacagawea was great, but there's kind of like a lot of, I don't want to say like cognitive dissonance because we don't have a ton of information on either of them, but there is kind of like,
I think the thing about Sacagawea is that we have a lot of information about this one piece of her life.
Yeah, and nothing
and
else.
then it's like very little after that, except Native American legend, which may or may not be accurate because it seems like by documentation she died very young.
Yeah, so it's kind of a lot of questions. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would rank Catherine the Great as a hemorrhoidal colic apoplexy stroke. So that's my opinion of it. I think she did some great things for the country. Not a big fan of the hypocrisy that seemingly always follows these people, and people a lot today. Really, we're all hypocrites in a lot of ways. But yeah, I don't know. She's me.
I just thought she would be interesting because I was scrolling through the other day and I saw
hot topics of people and culture that I can talk about that are relevant.
No, I mean, I was scrolling on Hulu and I'm like, oh, we never watched season 2 of The Great. I'm like, Catherine the Great might be interesting.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it was interesting. Like it's very interesting that someone who is basically a usurper and then a dictator is so beloved. That's always the same thing with Alexander the Great, though, too. I mean, the same type of thing. So, I mean, maybe there's something to be said about,
The Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 22 of History Out of the Box. I don't believe I asked anybody at all to subscribe.
You must.
And well, you don't have to. We would love it if you do.
I ask you humbly to.
We'd love it if you do. And obviously, we want this to bring value to you. So the purpose of the show is to teach you about historical figures. Obviously, we, impose our bias just a tad. If you're me, maybe a little spoonful. With that being said, we talk about historical people. We talk about their pimples. We talk about their ugliness. We talk about their attractiveness. We talk about their good deeds, their bad deeds, all those deeds all together. And if you're tired of people being categorized in a box with no depth and no context, then you found the right place, because we don't want to make these people one-dimensional. Mm-mm. I think Catherine, I don't think Catherine was very one-dimensional. I think she had a lot of complexity. But yeah, if you would like to subscribe, the button's going to be right down there. Super simple. Just click the button, click the little bell, and you'll get notifications for when our episodes come out. Normally, audio on Tuesdays and videos on Wednesdays, afternoon-ish. Sometimes that is subject to change. We will let you know. Most of the time, it's on the nose. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I think next week there's 2 people that we're debating on talking about. One of them is Mr. Edgar Allan Poe, who was actually a very poignant character in The Pale Blue Eye that just came out on Netflix. Is a phenomenal movie.
Highly recommend.
It made me cry. I cried at the very end.
Very good.
It's Christian Bale and sad. With that being said, either Edgar Allan Poe or, per a viewer's suggestion, Jack Parsons, which would be a very interesting
We'll
one.
do both, but which one we're doing first, we're deciding.
Which one. And then I don't know what we're doing after that. because it's going to be February. So there's going to be some very special.
I do have, since February is a big month for, I believe that's, wait, is it already almost February? Oh my gosh. Anyway, I have some ideas for February.
Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Bye.